Wyoming Territory, July 1879. The morning heat clung to the land like a fever, dry and unrelenting, as the train screeched into the dusty little town of Emigrant Gap. Tamarah Cole stepped off the last rail car with a small satchel in one hand and a baby wrapped tight in the other arm. A boy of about 6 trailed beside her, clutching the hem of her skirt like it was the only thing keeping him upright. She did not look up when people stared. She had grown used to whispers, to turned backs, and half meant kindness. She had not come here for welcome. She had come for work, for safety, for a place where no one knew her name or what the women back in Missouri had said about her. "That's the one," an older woman near the mercantile whispered to her friend, eyes narrowing. "The one whose husband ran off and left her with 2 children. She lost her mind after the baby came. Pastor said she was unfit for marriage." Tamarah kept walking, dust rising around her worn boots. She had heard worse. She found the tiny rented room above the livery stable and set down her crying daughter. Her son, Callan, sat on the edge of the cot, legs swinging, trying not to look tired. "Just for a little while," she whispered, sitting beside him. "We will find better, I promise." By sundown, she had secured a job washing linens and mending shirts behind the saloon. It paid little, but it was work. Her fingers moved fast, steady, even when her thoughts drifted somewhere darker. 3 days later, he walked in. He was tall, sun-browned, with a quiet way of moving as if he had spent most of his life listening to the land. His shirt was dusty from the trail, hat pulled low, but there was something kind in his eyes, something that made Tamarah pause. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "You dropped this." He held out a small cloth doll Callan's, the one Tamarah had sewn from scrap just to keep him smiling. She looked at the doll, then at the man. "Thank you," she said. He looked like he might say more but only nodded and turned to go. She watched him step into the street and disappear into the brightness of the day. His name, she learned from the saloon owner, was Silas Boone. A cattleman from the southern range, not much for talking, rode alone, helped folks when he could but kept to himself. That night Callan asked, "Mama, was that cowboy nice?" She tucked him in. "Yes, he was." The next week the doll was dropped again, this time outside the general store. Silas returned it without a word. By the 3rd time, Tamarah met him at the door before he could knock. "You must think we are the most forgetful family alive," she said, half smiling. He shrugged. "I reckon kids have a way of dropping what matters most." She looked at him, really looked. His shoulders were wide, hands rough from work, but his eyes held a steadiness she had not seen in years. "You always this helpful?" she asked. "Only when it counts." The next morning, he was waiting outside the laundry room door. "You got any use for an extra set of hands?" he asked. "I have a few days before I ride south again. Not much good at sewing, but I can haul water." She stared at him. "You do not even know me." "I do not have to," he said. "I see how hard you are trying. That is enough." And just like that, Silas Boone started showing up, quiet, steady, never pushing. He helped her carry baskets, fixed the broken hinge on her room's door, and once, when Callan scraped his knee, Silas knelt beside the boy like he had all the time in the world. Tamarah watched him from the doorway, her daughter asleep against her chest. She had not asked for help. She had not asked for anything, but Silas gave it anyway without expectation. "You are not like most men," she said one evening, not looking at him. "That a good thing or a bad thing, it is just different." He glanced at her. "Different is not always bad." The next Sunday they took a walk out past the cottonwoods near the creek. Callan raced ahead, chasing dragonflies, and Tamarah carried the baby close. "You never asked what happened to my husband," she said. "I figured if you wanted to tell me you would." She nodded, grateful. "He left when I was 7 months along, said he was going to find work, never came back. People said I lost my mind after. Maybe I did for a while." Silas paused near the water's edge. "Grief does not make someone unfit, it just makes them human." She looked at him, heart thudding. "You really believe that?" "I do." Silas reached out and took her hand, slow and sure. His fingers were warm, calloused, steady. She did not pull away. They stood there for a long while, the creek rustling behind them, the boy laughing somewhere up ahead. Tamarah breathed in the scent of sun, warmed earth and cottonwood bark, and something else, something she had not felt in years: hope. When they walked back toward town, Silas still held her hand, and he did not let go. The wind that swept through Emigrant Gap in late July carried with it the smell of sage and unsettled ground, the kind of wind that rustled thoughts loose if you weren't careful. Tamarah stood behind the saloon near the rows of drying shirts, clothespins clenched between her teeth as she worked. Her daughter stirred in the sling across her chest, fussing in the heat. "Let me hold her," Silas said, stepping around the corner with a bucket in each hand. "You'll get through those faster." Tamarah hesitated. "She knows me by now," he added, gentler this time. She passed the baby over, careful not to look too long at how easily he cradled her. He rocked side to side without thinking, humming something tuneless under his breath. The baby's fussing gave way to soft, wet sighs. "I need someone to watch her come Tuesday," Tamarah said, pinning a shirt to the line. "Mrs. Barlow's boy broke his leg and she's got her hands full." "I'll take her," Silas said. Tamarah turned. I've calved alone in a thunderstorm, nursed a raven-winged colt, and kept a neighbor's baby from crying through 2 nights of fever. I think I can manage a morning." She didn't answer right away. "You don't owe me anything for it," he said, watching the baby's lashes flutter closed. "You don't even have to say yes. Callan's not easy with strangers," she said. "Then I won't be a stranger." That evening, she let Callan walk with Silas to the edge of town where the boy hunted rocks with stripes in them. Tamarah watched from the porch of the livery, shelling peas into a tin basin. Every so often, she'd hear Callan's voice echo, high and eager, and then Silas's lower reply. No laughter, just quiet talk and the sound of boots on gravel. When they came back, Callan had a stone shaped like a heart in his hand and a new way of walking taller, like he'd seen something worth standing up for. The next morning, Silas brought a small wooden horse, carved with careful hands and darkened with oil. "For her," he said, placing it gently on the windowsill beside the cradle. Tamarah didn't speak. She picked it up, ran her thumb along the smooth spine. "You don't have to like me," he said. "But I'd like you to know I mean to stay. You don't even know if I want anyone to." Silas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, not crowding her. "That's true. But sometimes you don't know you need someone until they're already there. You don't scare easy, do you? I've been scared enough to know when not to be." The baby stirred. Tamarah adjusted the blanket, eyes still on the horse. "I was 17 when I married. Thought I was older than I was. Most of us do." He said kind things. He had a way of sounding sure. "I didn't know that wasn't the same as being steady." "You do now," Silas said. They stood there in the gold-tinged hush of early dusk, the sounds of town softening as night crept in. "You're not going to ask me to be grateful?" she asked. "No, or pretend like you're owed something." "No," he said again. "Then I'll let you come back tomorrow." He tipped his hat and walked off, not looking back. That night, Tamarah lay awake beside her children, listening to the wind drift across the roof. She thought about the way Silas had looked at her not with pity, but with recognition. Like he saw the parts of her she was trying to stitch back together and wasn't afraid of the seams. She had been told love was a thing won by softness or obedience, but maybe it was steadiness. Maybe it was a man showing up with a carved horse and a quiet offer of help, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be alone anymore. The sun had barely cleared the ridge when Tamarah stepped into the field behind the church, skirts brushing against the high grass. Her hands were raw from the week's wash, but her heart was steadier than it had been in months. Silas was already there, kneeling beside Callan, who was focused on balancing a flat stone atop a stack of others. "I told him you'd come," Silas said without rising. Tamarah set the baby's basket beneath the shade of a cottonwood, careful to tuck the blanket close under her daughter's chin. "You two building something?" "A fort," Callan said, "but not like soldiers, more like a place you go when you want the quiet." Silas glanced up. He came up with that on his own. She sat near them, smoothing the grass beneath her. "He doesn't sleep much when the wind picks up. Says it reminds him of our last house." Silas nodded once. "I used to hide under the porch when the wind got too loud. My ma would leave a candle burning in the window so I'd know when to come out." Tamarah tilted her head. "You never talk about her. She died during the winter the herd starved." "My father blamed the storm, but I think her heart just gave out." Tamarah looked at Callan, still focused on his stones. I didn't know you lost her. Most folks here don't ask. She reached out, brushing her fingers over a stalk of wild wheat. You ever think about leaving Wyoming? Once, he said. Years back, I got as far as Denver. Streets were paved and nobody looked you in the eye. I turned around before nightfall. Tamarah smiled faintly. I always thought I'd end up in a bigger town. I used to imagine shops with glass windows and clean streets, a place where no one knew who I was. Did it help? He asked. Back then, it gave me something to wait for. Now. She trailed off. Silas leaned back, resting on one elbow. Now what? Now I think I'd rather have a place where someone knows me and chooses to stay anyway. Callan stood and brushed off his hands. It's done, he said, but we need something to mark the front, like a sign. Silas sat up. Got anything in your satchel? Tamarah pulled a scrap of blue calico from her pocket. This tore from my hem last week. Callan took it and tied it to a stick, then planted it in the dirt beside the stone stack. Now it's ours. Silas watched him for a long moment before turning to Tamarah. He's got your way of seeing things. He's got more strength than I ever did. No, Silas said. You just used yours to carry 2 people instead of 1. She looked down, heart catching in her throat. He didn't press it, just sat beside her, quiet again, until the baby stirred. You want to hold her? Tamarah asked. Silas blinked, then nodded. If you're sure. She lifted her daughter from the basket and passed her into his arms. His hands moved slow, practiced. He tucked the blanket around her legs and rocked gently, his jaw tightening like it always did when he was thinking too much. I was never around babies, he said. But I always figured if they're breathing easy, you're doing something right. Tamarah leaned in, close enough to see the way his thumb traced the edge of the baby's bonnet. She doesn't cry when you hold her. Maybe she knows she's safe. Callan came over and sat between them, resting his head against Tamarah's arm. The wind moved through the grass again, quieter this time. The fort held. Silas looked at her then, not hurried, not hopeful, just open. I've been thinking about what comes after, he said. After what? After this stretch of summer ends, after the herds moved, after the work slows. She waited. I want to stay, not just in town, with you. Tamarah's breath caught. People still talk. I hear them. They'll say I trapped you. He met her eyes. Let them. Her throat tightened. I'm not asking for an answer now, he said. But when you're ready, I'd like to build something that doesn't blow over when the wind rises. Something lasting. Tamarah looked at Callan, whose eyes had begun to close, and at her daughter, whose fist was curled against Silas's chest. Then she looked at Silas, at the lines sun had carved into his face, at the steadiness in the way he waited. You can come for supper, she said. Tomorrow, he nodded once. And still, he didn't let go of the baby. The table inside Tamarah's small rented room had only 3 chairs, one of them missing a rung, the other 2 scuffed from years of hard use. She wiped it clean with a damp cloth just as Callan pressed his face to the window. He's common, the boy said, voice hushed like he wasn't sure if he should be excited or not. Tamarah nodded, tying her apron tighter. She'd made stew with salt pork and boiled potatoes and set out a shallow dish of canned peaches she'd been saving since April. The baby slept in a basket near the hearth, cheeks flushed from the warmth. When Silas stepped inside, he brought the scent of horses and sun-baked leather and something else Tamarah hadn't named yet. He carried a bundle of firewood under one arm and a wrapped parcel in the other. Smelled supper halfway down the street, he said. Brought something to go with it. He set the parcel on the table. Inside was a round loaf of bread, still warm. Tamarah touched the crust with her fingertips. You baked this? No, he said. Mrs. Larrabee owed me a favor. Callan grinned. You said you didn't like bread. I said I don't trust anything that goes stale too fast, but I make exceptions. They ate by lamplight. The stew was thin, but it filled their bellies. The peaches glistened in their dish like small suns. Silas ate slow, like he meant every bite to last. Callan talked about a nest he'd found in the rafters and asked if Silas had ever seen a hawk up close. I once watched one dive clean through a dust storm, Silas said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Didn't miss its mark. What was it hunting? Callan asked. A rabbit, quick one. But not quick enough. After the meal, Tamarah poured water into the wash basin and Silas helped dry the dishes. She passed him a cracked plate and a threadbare towel. "You ever have a family of your own?" she asked, not looking at him. "I had a brother," he said, "older by 3 years. He drowned crossing the North Platte when we were driving cattle. I was 15. She folded the towel slowly. "I'm sorry, so was I for a long time." She stacked the plates, then leaned against the counter. "You don't have to stay long tonight. I wasn't planning to leave early." Callan had curled up on the cot, thumb in his mouth, the baby asleep beside him. The room had no door to close between them, but Silas kept his voice low. "I've been thinking about building a place," he said. "Out past the creek bend, land's dry but there's a spring nearby, enough for a small orchard someday." Tamarah crossed her arms. "You plan to live there alone?" "I don't plan to live there alone," he said. Silas stepped closer, slow enough that she could have moved if she wanted. She didn't. "You'd have to be patient," she said. "There are mornings I can't speak for the first hour, nights when breathing feels like work." "I don't mind quiet," he said, "and I'm not easy with touch." "I'd never ask you to be." Her fingers tightened on the counter's edge. "They don't stop saying it." "That I'm unfit." "They can say what they like," Silas said. "I know better." She looked up, eyes shining but dry. "Why are you so sure?" "Because I've seen how you carry your children, how you keep moving when there's nothing left in your hands but grit. That's not unfit. That's what strong looks like when it's tired." Tamarah reached for his hand. He met hers halfway. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The lamp flickered. Outside, wind stirred the leaves. When he finally left, he kissed her knuckles and promised to return after the next snowfall, once the herd had been moved down into the red desert basin. She didn't ask him not to go. He didn't ask her to wait. But when the door closed behind him, she stood by it for a while, palm pressed to the wood, steady as breath. And in the cradle, her daughter slept on, safe, warm, and no longer waiting. The first snowfall came early, dusting the high plains in a thin skin of white that cracked underfoot. Tamarah stood on the porch of the new cabin, her shawl pulled tight, watching the edge of the horizon. She hadn't expected him so soon. Winter had just begun to settle its weight across the land, and the trail south had a way of keeping men longer than planned. But there he was, coming up the ridge with a canvas bundle tied behind his saddle. He rode slower than usual, not from weariness, but as if he wanted to see the place fully before stepping into it again. The cabin stood firm against the wind, a one-room home with a loft and a stone chimney Tamarah had helped build with her own raw hands. Smoke drifted lazily from the hearth. "You're early," she said as he stepped down from the saddle. "Figured I'd rather spend Christmas with you than the cattle." She folded her arms. "Christmas is 2 weeks off. I like to be sure." He untied the bundle and handed it to her, waiting as she opened the flap and pulled out a rough-hewn cradle carved from pine, the edges rubbed smooth with oil. "I thought she was getting too long for the basket," he said. Tamarah ran her hand along the rail. "You made this." "I needed something to do at night. Too cold to sleep sometimes." She didn't answer, only turned and stepped inside, holding the cradle like it held more than wood. The cabin smelled of pine boards and burnt coffee. The baby sat on a quilt near the fire, batting at a spoon. Callan was outside, trying to snare jackrabbit tracks in the snow. Tamarah set the cradle beside the hearth and lowered herself to the floor. "You built this place," Silas said, stepping in and closing the door behind him. "Every inch. You helped raise the walls. But you made it a home." He crouched beside her and watched the baby chew the edge of her sleeve. "I've been thinking," he said. "There's a man I know in Sweetwater who sells apple trees, hardy ones grafted for this weather." Tamarah glanced at him. "You thinking of planting? A row or two. Might not bear for a few years, but someday." She leaned back against the hearth. "You planning to still be here by then?" "I was hoping to be." She looked at the baby, then at his face. "If you stay, you'll be expected to marry, I know. There's a preacher in town. Doesn't ask many questions. I'm not afraid of questions." She stood slowly and walked to the cupboard, pulling down the tin box where she kept her sewing things. From it, she lifted a folded square of fabric, faded blue with a white edge. "This was part of my wedding dress," she said. "Back then, I thought it meant something different." He stepped closer. "And now Now I think it can mean what we make of it. She placed the fabric in his hand. He held it carefully, like it might tear if handled wrong. I'd marry you in the snow with nothing but this between us, she said. If you meant to stay, I mean to stay. She let out a breath she'd been holding for years. They married the next morning under the cottonwoods, the preacher's voice muffled by wool scarves and the hush of falling snow. Callan stood beside them, holding the baby in his arms, solemn as a sentry. No one from town came. Tamarah hadn't asked them to. Afterward, they returned to the cabin, and Silas brought in more wood while Tamarah set bread to rise. The baby slept in the cradle he'd carved, and Callan dozed beside the fire, his feet warm in new socks Silas had traded for in Rawlins. That night they sat at the table, hands clasped, heads bowed. No feast, just stew again, but it was enough. I never thought I'd start over, Tamarah said. I never thought I'd stop running, Silas answered. They lay in the loft that night, wrapped in blankets, the wind tapping gently at the shutters. He pulled her close, her head resting against his chest. Do you ever miss the trail? She asked. Not anymore. She traced the edge of his collarbone with her thumb. You're not restless? Not when I have something worth staying for. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, the fire burned low, steady. In the years that followed, the orchard took root. The trees were slow to grow, but they held through wind and drought just like them. Tamarah taught Callan to read by firelight, and Silas showed him how to split wood without wasting the swing. The baby grew into a girl who danced barefoot through the furrows in spring. They planted a garden. They built a second room. One year they added a porch swing, and Tamarah sat there every evening, sewing while Silas rocked beside her, his hand always close enough to touch. No one in town called her Unfit anymore. They called her Mrs. Boone. And on the coldest nights, when the wind howled across the plains and the trees bent low under ice, Silas would reach for her hand and hold it like he had that first time quietly, without question, and with no intention of ever letting go.